My role in this is to try and generate awareness so we can have a discussion before that time of crisis when people are emotional and afraid and concerned about their money. About whether we should be having BlackRock at the helm of this when the next crisis emerges. I would say no. Underclass of people who AI acts upon, who can't understand what AI is doing to them, and eventually, because of their dependence on AI, will become cognitively diminished and mentally unable, essentially, to make decisions for themselves without AI's help.
After the 2008 financial crisis devastated the global economy and wiped out over $2 trillion, the New York Federal Reserve turned to BlackRock for assistance. The firm managed billions in troubled assets, helping the government evaluate and sell these holdings. However, this arrangement was met with skepticism, as many details remained hidden, leading to concerns about a potential conflict of interest. While BlackRock was advising the government, it was also helping its private clients purchase the same distressed assets. Despite the criticism, BlackRock significantly expanded its reach in the years following the crisis. The firm grew from managing about $1.3 trillion in assets in 2008 to nearly $7 trillion today, with total assets now exceeding $10 trillion. It has been instrumental in stabilizing markets during subsequent crises, including the economic fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, and more recently, assisting the U.S. government in offloading $114 billion in securities from failed banks like Signature Bank and Silicon Valley Bank in 2023. In a recent discussion with journalist Tom Bilyeu, investigative journalist Whitney Webb highlighted the close-knit nature of the global elite and their financial networks. She pointed out that while the public often gets caught up in divisive topics like gender and politics, the powerful continue to pursue their interests, driven by an insatiable desire for wealth. During crises, fear often leads the public to demand immediate solutions, sometimes at the expense of considering long-term consequences. Webb raised important concerns about how BlackRock seems to have a knack for predicting downturns and advising central bankers on policy responses even before crises hit. This raises a crucial question. Are they shaping the policies governing how we respond to future economic challenges? Given BlackRock's significant influence within the Biden administration, there's an urgent need for greater transparency regarding its role in economic decision-making. Now, let's watch the clips from the interview. Before we proceed, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future updates.
When a crisis is happening, people tend to have emotional responses and tend to be coming from a place of fear. And that tends to prevent people from thinking critically or calmly or rationally about situations or about policies. And so a lot of, during COVID, obviously a lot of focus was on COVID-19 itself, on the biosecurity situation, not just so much on the financial situation. But for example, if there was a major crisis going forward that would greatly impact Americans' ability to engage in economic activity or have their purchasing power, close to wiped out or something, I think you would see a lot of people really beg for any policy response. Solve this crisis now, we need something, and not really have people think about what is the best policy response to this kind of crisis. People aren't going to think calmly and bring everything to the table, and it's very unlikely there will be some sort of calm, open public debate about it. Generally, what happens is that the government says people are scared and emotional. They clamor for some sort of solution from the government, and the government offers some sort of solution. And, like with COVID-19, BlackRock anticipated the next downturn about a month before the repo market started going haywire and presented to central bankers, this is the policy you should implement during the next downturn. And it's very possible that BlackRock is working on policy papers, for central bankers or other people in the U.S. government about what policy should be implemented if, this type of crisis happens or that type of crisis happens. It seems like they seem to be designing the policies, I guess. And they've, had, in the Biden administration over the past 4 years, they've been leading his former BlackRock executives have been leading his economic team, bringing us to where we are now, and likely influencing what will happen over the next couple of years whenever or up until this crisis emerges. So it seems, very likely that they'll be, dominating, fiscal response again. And then people, because they're not really aware of how this is developed or really, there's just not a lot of media coverage about, for example, the role of BlackRock in the Biden administration or in, on Kamala's economic team specifically. I've seen very little coverage, if any, of that. Recently, maybe a few blips here and there of when those people are appointed, but nothing significant beyond that. And then, of course, there was very little scrutiny of U.S. COVID fiscal response, I think, as well. And it's just sort of written off as this is what the government had to do to respond to the crisis in a lot of situations. But I don't think that's necessarily true because, again, that fiscal response began well before, COVID was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization, preceding that by like several months, right? So I don't know. I think it's a complicated situation. It's complicated to anticipate what will exactly happen. But again, history tends to repeat itself in these cases. And the fact that you have BlackRock so embedded with the Democrats specifically, and also have this historical precedent with Trump when he was in office last time, it seems very likely that they'll be doing this again. So I guess my role in this is to try and generate awareness so we can have a discussion before that time of crisis when people are emotional and afraid and concerned about their money, about whether we should be having BlackRock at the helm of this when the next crisis emerges. I would say no.
It is increasingly apparent that a small group of powerful individuals exert significant control over our society, leading to questions about their motivations and intentions. This concentration of power raises critical concerns about accountability and representation, as many people feel marginalized and unheard in a system that appears to prioritize the interests of the few over the needs of the many. Many observers fear we are heading toward a two-tiered system reminiscent of a modern feudal society, where a select elite manages a large underclass. This elite, equipped with advanced knowledge and resources, may shape policies and societal norms to serve their interests, further entrenching inequality. What's particularly intriguing and somewhat unsettling is the notion that these powerful elites may believe they can easily sway public perception in today's world. A notable example is a 2014 study funded by the U.S. Air Force, which explored the potential of social media for behavior manipulation, akin to operating drones. The premise was that by tailoring the information individuals receive through sophisticated algorithms, it would be possible to shape their thoughts and actions profoundly. Given social media's pervasive influence in our daily lives, the potential for distorting reality becomes increasingly concerning. Notably, figures like Schmidt and Kissinger have cautioned that we could reach a stage where differentiating between what is genuine and what is artificially created becomes exceedingly difficult.
I think it's important to say that at least in my opinion, I think where the powers that be, however you want to define that, are taking people is essentially leading us to some sort of two-tier society where there is really no need for a middle class, and it's really more accurately described as like a neo-feudal style society where you have a large underclass managed by sort of this more elite group that would do the managing. And I think it really falls under what some people have referred to as technocracy, sort of this idea of more of like a scientific dictatorship. And there's actually this prominent figure from the Club of Rome named Dennis Meadows, and the Club of Rome is an entity that has a very intertwined history with groups that have become infamous over the past several years, like the World Economic Forum, for example. But Dennis Meadows essentially said something to the effect that, for the good of people and the planet and the economy, in his words, that it was going to be necessary to either reduce the world's population so that people could have freedom and use resources the way they want, or that there would have to be a scientific dictatorship imposed on 8 billion or 7 billion people in order to ensure accurate allocation of resources and all of this stuff by a educated, technocratic, scientific elite. And there are some thinkers in Silicon Valley, like Eric Schmidt, for example, who wrote a book on AI with Henry Kissinger, that essentially say that there's going to be this sort of future brought to us by AI, where there will be the class of people that understand how AI works, that program and maintain it. And then there will be this underclass, really, they don't say underclass, but I would say that, of people who AI acts upon, who can't understand what AI is doing to them. And eventually, because of their dependence on AI, will become cognitively diminished and mentally unable, essentially, to make decisions for themselves without AI's help. And there's a lot of other indications, I would argue, whether it's UBI, which again is going to be for not, I don't think, the top oligarchs in Silicon Valley, like Bill Gates and Reid Hoffman and Peter Thiel, are going to be receiving UBI. I think it's intended to be for other people that aren't necessarily in that economic tier. I think it's very likely you're going to see, if these people succeed in their designs, really more of a two-tier society without any sort of need for a middle class. And so I think that's part of why it's been happening. And I think, as to why they might be playing with fire, I think perhaps they're confident that they have a lot more, it's much easier to manipulate people now than perhaps in times past. For example, there was a 2014 research study that was funded by the US Air Force that was about studying how to use social media to control people like drones. Which I think is a very disturbing research proposal in and of itself. But basically this idea that you could use social media networks by tailoring what information people see and don't see down to the individual based on data mined about them off of the internet and then analyzed by various algorithms to basically, essentially mind control people and, in the world, in the words, I guess, of that Air Force proposal. And, other militaries around the world have spent millions upon millions of dollars over the past decade plus researching how to manipulate people on social media platforms. So I think it's very possible that they think they can manage it since a lot of, discourse has become increasingly online.
Whitney Webb's message serves as an urgent call to action. As we look ahead, we must seriously consider the consequences of allowing a small elite to shape our societal framework and influence technological advancements. If we don't actively engage in open and meaningful discussions about these issues, we could find ourselves in a future where manipulation and control are the norm rather than the exception. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Also, ensure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. Until next time.